This lesson covers the creation and management of order processing constraints. Our learning objectives for this lesson are as follows. Create a constraint entity, set up a processing constraint, and import processing constraints. This graphic gives you an overview of the full order-to-cash process. All these features are available when Oracle Fusion Cloud Order Management is integrated with other Oracle Fusion Cloud SCM applications. Remember, things like credit check, transportation planning, and compliance screening can happen both at the time of order submission and again during fulfillment. The pre-built integrations shown here help tie everything together for a smooth order-to-cash flow. Throughout this course, we'll focus on a specific set of these applications as they relate to order management and fulfillment, and we'll look at how other systems connect both upstream and downstream. For this lesson, we'll focus specifically on processing constraints. This graphic shows the order fulfillment process from capturing the order all the way through fulfillment. Here's how it flows. First, orders are captured in the system. When the order is submitted, several automatic actions happen, including running validations and defaulting extensions, performing built-in validations for order management, pricing, and configurator, applying constraints, which is the main focus of this lesson, pricing the order, including tax calculation and any pricing guidelines, running credit checks, completing global trade management checks, and handling approvals as needed. After submission, an orchestration process is assigned to each fulfillment line, and then the order moves forward for fulfillment. In this lesson, we'll take a closer look at how constraints work in the overall process. Our first topic covers an introduction to processing constraints and their purpose. Processing constraints work in the background. They automatically monitor changes to orders, order lines, and fulfillment lines. Most of the time, users won't even notice them unless they try to make a change that's not allowed. In that case, the user will see a message explaining why the change is being rejected based on the specific constraint. Oracle Order Management comes with a set of predefined processing constraints that you can enable or disable as needed. If your business needs something different, you can also create your own additional constraints. Some of the key operations that can be controlled by processing constraints include cancel, create, delete, split, submit, update, and validate an order. These constraints help you maintain order integrity and enforce your business rules automatically. This screenshot shows an example of a processing constraint in action. In this case, the constraint stops users from submitting a change order if they try to update the supplier attribute after the fulfillment line has already shipped. You can also see the message that pops up to let the user know why their change was rejected. Let's break down some key terms used when working with processing constraints. Record set. This is a group of records that share certain attribute values. For example, you might want to evaluate all lines on a specific order or all orders for a particular customer. When setting up processing constraints, you'll specify a record set to validate using its validation template. Attribute. This is a business object characteristic that identifies which records are included in the set, such as an order line number, customer name, or item category. Validation rule set. This is where you name a condition and define exactly how that condition should be validated for your processing constraint. Constraint entity. This is the business object that the processing constraint is checking. For example, you might prevent changes to fulfillment lines once their orchestration process reaches a certain step. And processing constraint. When you set up a processing constraint, you'll define the following. Role. The user role that isn't allowed to make the change. As an example, stopping order managers from editing orders past a certain process step. The operation. The type of action that's not allowed, like create, update, cancel, split, delete, submit, or validate. And condition. This is the criteria that must be met for the constraint to apply. For instance, you could create a rule that only kicks in if an order is already booked. These elements work together to control what changes are allowed in order management and help enforce your business policies automatically. The second topic explains how to manage constraint entities. A constraint entity refers to the business object that a processing constraint is applied to. There are two main types. First, view entity. This covers order headers, order lines, and fulfillment lines. Each view entity contains related attributes that correspond to a database table. Oracle provides predefined view entities. You can't create new ones. However, you can add extra attributes, like flex fields, to an existing view entity. And the second type is process task entity. This type is based on a combination of orchestration process, task, and service. It represents where the transaction is in the process flow. Process task entities can be used to block actions, like updating certain attributes or deleting specific records once a transaction reaches a certain step in the orchestration process. They also help validate that required attributes are present for fulfillment request, like when creating or updating a shipment or creating a reservation. Oracle gives you some predefined process task entities, but you can create additional ones to fit your business needs. For example, you might define a process task entity for the update shipping layer. The orchestration process would be order only process, task shipping, and service update shipment. If you create a constraint for this specific combination, the system will only check the constraint when both the process name and the task match during order processing. This gives you more precise control over when and where processing constraints kick in. This lesson includes an instructor demonstration for creating a constraint entity. A second instructor demonstration shows how to enable additional attributes for a view entity. The third topic explains how to manage processing constraints. Start by deciding which record sets you want your processing constraints to review. For example, if you want your constraint to check all fulfillment lines that belong to the same orchestration order line, you would select the order fulfillment line entity. If needed, you can create a new constraint entity to use in your processing constraint. For constraints related to the orchestration process, you'd create a process task entity. Otherwise, you can stick with one of the predefined view entities. There's often no need to create a new one for most cases. And don't forget, if you're building an order management extension, business rule, or processing constraint, make sure to filter out any order lines that you don't want to include in your logic. For more details on how to extend order management, check out the lesson on extending order management. As we discussed earlier, a validation rule set gives a name to a condition and specifies how that condition should be checked for a processing constraint. If you're working with a table type validation rule set, remember you'll need to generate the constraint package before you can actually use it in a processing constraint. Now, let's use the data you set up in the record sets and validation rule set tabs to actually create your processing constraint. You also have the option to reverse the logic of a validation rule set if needed. For example, if your original rule is shipping instructions field is not null, you could flip it so that the rule becomes shipping instructions field is null, depending on what you want to enforce. It's a good idea to test your processing constraints in a test environment before using them in production. You can also import and export any processing constraints you've created between environments, for example, from your test environment to your production environment. Just keep in mind, this export feature only works for constraints you've created yourself. If a constraint is marked as predefined, which means there's a checkbox on the Manage Processing Constraint page, you won't be able to modify or export it. The Manage Processing Constraints task in the Setup and Maintenance work area automatically takes care of the relationships between your constraints, conditions, rule sets, record sets, and so on. But if you're importing or exporting processing constraints, you'll need to handle these relationships yourself in the CSV files. To keep everything organized, always import and export the full set of CSV files together as a single zip package. This keeps the relationships between the files intact. Avoid importing or exporting individual CSV files or just a subset, since that can break links between your setup items. Also, make sure any data you import, like user roles, already exist in your Oracle Cloud applications. For example, if you include a role named My Role in your setup, make sure My Role exists and is active in Oracle. You can use the Security Console to add or activate a role. If you do include a role, its name in the import file needs to match exactly with the role common name value in Security Console. If you don't need a role, just leave it out of your import file. To support your learning, 2 student practices have been provided for this lesson. First, you'll create a processing constraint and test it against a sales order. Then, you'll create and test a revision against your processing constraint.